Wow, that is insane. All right, so I've been asked many times what my dream phone is over the years. And usually my answer is actually something impossible, because I want like the screen from this one phone, but then the cameras from this other phone, and this huge battery over here, and the high-end chip from that other phone. And then I kind of want to Frankenstein them all together. But now there's a phone that appears to be as good as a phone spec sheet can possibly be at this very moment. Like if you were to make your 2025 dream phone spec sheet with unlimited budget, what would you do? Well, you'd probably start with a Snapdragon 8 Elite and something like 16 gigs of RAM and a terabyte of storage. And then of course, an ultra bright, high refresh rate AMOLED. And don't forget even super thin bezels all the way around. Then you gotta throw in at least a 6,000 milliamp hour battery, but also make it one of those silicon carbon batteries so the phone can still be thin. And then give it 100 watt charging and 50 watt wireless charging and reverse charging too while you're at it. Then give it a full-on 1-inch sensor for the main camera. And then if physics even allows it, you can also give it a huge sensor for an ultra wide and a telephoto. Actually, I don't know, make it 2 telephotos. And all the trimmings. It's gotta have them all. Wi-Fi 7, NFC, dual SIM, IP69 of course, even an infrared emitter. Can't forget about that. And yeah, that is the exact spec sheet of this phone. This is the Oppo Find X8 Ultra. It's a new Ultra flagship that's never come into the US, which is a bummer for me, but my God, this phone, this is basically the max of what humanity is capable of in 2025 if you don't cut a single corner. Now the design is actually pretty tame considering this was the last Oppo Find Ultra phone, but now it's kind of blending in with the rest of the flat-sided, boxy, look-alike slabs out there with a big camera bump. The phone feels normal flagship size too, yet somehow inside they've fit a 6,100 milliamp hour battery. Well, not somehow, we know how they did it. It's a silicon carbon battery, which is what I was telling you guys about at the beginning of 2025. We know these high-end flagship phones are gonna have silicon carbon batteries, which let them have a ton of capacity, but still actually be pretty thin. And it's not just the capacity, it also charges at 100 watts. So it can go from dead to full in something like 40 minutes, which is obviously incredibly convenient, but also anytime the phone's even a little bit low, you can just plug it in for a few short minutes, and it feels like it's basically right up to nearly full again. It's awesome. And then throw in 50 watt wireless charging and reverse wireless charging too. You just can't really ask for much more out of a battery. So then around the front, the screen is also chart topping. 1440p resolution, super sharp, check. 120 hertz LTPO, also check. 1600 nits full screen brightness with 2500 nits peak HDR, check. 2160 hertz PWM dimming, also check. This display looks great pretty much everywhere. And it also has that really fast under display ultrasonic fingerprint reader, and then that tiny hole punch selfie camera at the top, and then just the super thin bezels all the way around. So I feel like you also can't ask for much more out of a phone display. But I have a feeling when they do the keynote for this phone, like when they do announce it, they're probably gonna spend most of their time on the camera stuff, because this is where it starts to get ridiculous. And I know cameras are not all just about specs. Like obviously there's more to the story. There's the tuning, the color science, and the processing and everything else. But the spec sheet for this camera system is ridiculous. There are technically 5 cameras on the back of this phone. Okay, so the first one, the primary camera, is a 1-inch type sensor, which is already huge. It's crazy. I've talked about these a little bit in the past, but in case you missed it, that's the same sensor size as point and shoot camera, like the RX100. So these are massive sensors that just let in a ton of light. This one's 50 megapixels. It has optical image stabilization. It has an f1.8 aperture, and that is already gonna take up a lot of space inside this phone. This sensor is 63% larger than the iPhone 16 Pro Max's main sensor, and 69% larger than the one in the Galaxy S25 Ultra. Nice. But then the second camera, the 3x telephoto, is also enormous. That 50 megapixel sensor is 300% larger than the telephoto in the Galaxy S25 Ultra. It's literally the same size as the primary camera in their own Find X8 flagship and the ROG phone. But then there's even more, because there's a second telephoto camera, another 50 megapixel, that is 6x this time. And this one is also 30% larger than the S25 Ultra's second telephoto, and 36% larger than the iPhone 16 Pro Max's second telephoto. So another huge sensor. And then throw in another huge 50 megapixel ultra wide camera, Plus, that little one in the corner is a chroma sensor specifically dedicated to collecting color temperature information for white balance. And overall, I think this is the most impressive collection of hardware I have ever seen in a phone camera. So, okay, how does that translate to real life? Well, I've had the phone for a couple days now. Almost exactly what you'd expect, with bigger sensors gathering more light, shallower depth of field. Textbook. I ended up focusing quite a bit on the larger telephotos, which are, like I said, grabbing more light so they can freeze action better with faster shutter speeds, and you can get less grainy, better looking low light shots with them as well. And they are awesome with smooth, soft background blur, looking like they're coming from a real camera. And then the same with the primary sensor, but even better, the super shallow depth of field is shallower than normal, to the point where sometimes it actually does miss focus, and it's even more obvious because, well, physics. With the right software tuning though, the sky's the limit for this type of hardware. The chroma sensor is supposed to help specifically dial in white balance in mixed lighting scenes. And the 3x camera also does the macros, so you don't have to get physically super up close to your subject like you would with an ultra-wide macro, which seems to be more common in the past year of phones, which I think is smart. And then also, the farthest of the zoom goes all the way up to 120x, and I found that with quite a bit of AI processing, it can look kind of weird on people and regular subjects, but if you want to read text through this phone camera, you can take a shot, give it a second to process, and it does its best to interpret what the characters it's seeing are, and sometimes does a really good job. So shout out to the AI actually starting to get a little bit better. If anyone's curious, the front camera is also quite good. It's 32 megapixels with autofocus. And then on the video front, I think the Snapdragon 8 Elite is absolutely putting in work, because this phone can do 4K 120 FPS Dolby Vision video, for crying out loud, from both the 1X and the 3X. My plan is to shoot the next autofocus channel video on this phone so you can see what the footage really looks like, you can hear what the microphones sound like, so definitely get subscribed over there for the next car review from this phone camera. But anyway, the spec maxing wouldn't be complete without a few extras. So of course, IP68 and IP69 for this phone, because your phone might encounter a hot jet of water. It might. There's also great haptics. There's the latest and greatest Wi-Fi 7 chip on board. There's up to a terabyte of UFS 4.1 storage and, yes, 16 gigs of RAM. There's also an infrared blaster, which is a throwback that most phones do not include anymore, but it's nice to know that you can still turn on and off random TVs that aren't even yours. But if all that wasn't enough, there are also a couple extra buttons on this phone. And this is also where you are reminded of how shameless Oppo can be sometimes. So top left corner, they've replaced the alert slider, which I really liked, with this single customizable shortcut button here. It's a shortcut button. You can dive into the settings and have it do any one of these 8 pre-programmed actions, basically the exact same ones that Apple did with their action button. There is no fully custom, like, launch whatever app you want option. I kind of wish you could do that, but a bunch of the common functions are here. And then you see this little flush cutout here on the side of the phone. This is called the quick button, and it's touch sensitive for sliding back and forth, and can double tap to open the camera, and then, you guessed it, control the camera. It only took him a few months to copy camera control. So yeah, you can slide back and forth from the left and right to zoom in and out. Yeah, kind of shameless, and honestly a little bit annoying on the side of the phone. I accidentally do it more often than I want to do it on purpose, but if you happen to be a fan of camera control on the newest iPhones, they have built that piece of hardware into their phone too. You can also long press it for burst shooting. For those of you who have used Oppo phones before, you know the shamelessness runs deep. Like ColorOS 15, it's still good and it still has a ton of its own features, but it is impossible to ignore all of the iOS copying that they do, from the settings app to the split notifications and quick settings to the dynamic island to the camera app layout to the lock screen customization. My favorite part is where they tell everyone you can even airdrop straight from an Oppo to an iPhone, because they've got built-in airdrop, but you actually need to install a special app on the iPhone to make it work, which kind of defeats the whole purpose, doesn't it? It's just funny to notice this every time. I honestly don't mind a lot of the copying as long as they're copying the good stuff, but yeah, to me it kind of highlights mainly the difference between, the US market and other markets, where in the US they're competing often on ecosystem and iMessage lock-in, versus just pure hardware competition. So in those markets where you can kind of just pick your favorite phone based on what hardware you like the most, why not build a phone that's got a bunch of the aesthetics and features from the iPhone, but then also all the advantages to Android and all the other big numbers and big specs to back it up. It's kind of feels like what we wish the iPhone would be doing here, but it isn't. Makes you think. So I haven't been given a price tag for this phone as of the time of this recording, but considering the Find X8 Pro is an $800 phone, it's fair to assume this will probably be a flagship priced $1,000 phone. But to borrow the line from the OnePlus 13 review earlier this year, where the bar's been set, I think now I can say the bar's been raised to a really good spot. Thanks for watching. Catch you guys in the next one. Peace.